And we realize that this is not only the first time we've ever tried to train folks to do remote diagnostic reading assessment. When you go out into the field and actually try it, you'll be among the first people in the world trying it out. I have to assume that around the country, other adult educators are trying to do something similar, especially if they have the same commitment to diagnostic assessment that we do here in Massachusetts. But anyway, welcome. Let's get started. Pam could give us the next slide. In a minute, we'll talk about the learning objectives. When it comes to introductions, we're going to do those, as you'll see in a minute, instead of doing them orally and talking to each other. I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions in the chat box. And after the introductions, I'll do a really quick overview of the rationale for why we do diagnostic reading assessment. It shouldn't be new to any of you because one of the tickets to get into this training was to have taken either STAR or the diagnostic assessment course in its live version or before that or after that in its current hybrid version. And then we'll actually get into the substance of it, administering the background questionnaire, and then looking at remote assessment. Point 5. There are two ways it can go. Option A would be just if you did all of the assessments just using a cell phone, if that's the only access the student had. And B, which would be nice if we can pull it off, would be to do a Zoom administration of the tests. And then we'll have some time when you'll be in little two-person chat groups to practice using Zoom and to practice putting documents up on the screen so that the student who's in the field will be able to see the list of words, say, that you want them to read or the oral reading passage. And then there's some time for summary and conclusions. The learning objectives are pretty straightforward. The first decision we'll talk about is how to decide whether you can do a remote assessment via Zoom or whether you're sort of restricted to a phone. And then the second one is just you'll be able to do either way, to use either approach, either option A, phone only, or option B, use Zoom. So it's pretty straightforward. Before we get into this quick overview of the rationale for diagnostic reading assessment, I notice that lots of you have access to the DAR. And that's wonderful because it's an absolutely great test. One of the things you'll have to think about if you want to use it remotely is, let's say you have a learner who isn't able, because they don't have a good enough computer or they don't have sufficient broadband at home, so they're not able to do Zoom with you. So you have to somehow get a hard copy of the student book into the student's hands. And you probably don't want to send out your good spiral bound copy of the student book from the DAR kit, because those, if you have to replace them, are really expensive. So you'll probably find yourself having to photocopy the DAR student booklet to put it in student hands to mail it to them so you can, in a week after that or so, assess them via the phone. So it's just something for those of you who are using the DAR to think about. So a quick overview. This shouldn't take long with this group. You guys could practically teach this course. So as you know, the map tells us about learners' reading comprehension, but in order to teach effectively, we also need to know people's strengths and needs and the components of reading. Word reading, phonics or word analysis, fluency, and word meaning, also known as vocabulary. And we use this information in order to place someone accurately in the appropriate class and on top of it to plan focused instruction at the appropriate level in each component. So if you do have component scores for folks, you may know that a person's word recognition may be at grade 5. That gives you an idea of what kinds of word recognition teaching you'd like to do in order to improve that skill for them. But their vocabulary might be somewhat higher, might be at grade 8 or 9. So that suggests that they might need more challenging vocabulary words than other people in the class. So you just have a sense of what their strengths and needs are. If you only have a reading comprehension score, you really can't tell whether they're stronger in print skills, word recognition, and fluency, say, and weaker in vocabulary, or vice versa. So all that information is important. And the other thing, and I shouldn't have to remind anybody again in this group because you're so experienced, the other thing to remember is that when you're doing these assessments, you don't just want to check off whether an answer is right or wrong. If possible, in something like word recognition or fluency, you want to try to record the errors the student makes. If they substitute a word, or if they mispronounce a word, or if they just can't even guess at it, that's all vital information for you. Even how they mispronounce a word can be helpful in directing how you need to teach word recognition to that person. And similarly, think about the answers to the word meaning test. You're going to be writing down what people say, just the way you would do in a live administration of the test. And that gives you an idea of how they talk about words, whether they give you very good definitions or whether they give you very narrow and overly specific ones. So just the fact that we're doing this potentially online doesn't change anything about why we're giving the tests and what kind of detailed information we'd like to get from them. And before we get into the details we're going to talk first about the background questionnaire. And although, again, you've probably given, some of you, dozens, if not hundreds of background questionnaires over the years, we've changed this one a little bit because we're trying to get information on people's computer familiarity and what kind of resources they have at home, whether they have what equipment they have, tablet, laptop, whatever, and whether they have access to high-speed broadband. But one thing I wanted to show you is this booklet, and I hope many people were able to download it, print it. There may not have been time because some of you may not have received this until just the last couple of days. But what Pam and I did was glue everything together that you will need to do remote assessment into one booklet. So the first thing you come across is the background questionnaire, and then further on you will come to all you need when you administer the word reading test. If you're using the Quick Adult Reading Inventory, the free one, all you need to give it, that you need in front of you, is the list of words. And then the students have in front of them a booklet, and they can go through that as well. If the students are doing it on the phone, you will have mailed them this booklet. If they're doing it via Zoom, you can project the different pages of the booklet as you need them onto the Zoom screen, and that's what will give you a chance to learn how to do and practice doing. So I want you, if you have it in front of you, to go to the last pages of the background questionnaire. It's page 5 in the booklet, but I'll go through, in case you don't, I'm going to go through each of the questions that Pam and I developed to help you get a handle on someone's computer capabilities for remote testing. Excuse me while I fumble to get on the right page. You're on the phone with a person, you're making the first contact with them, and you've started doing the background questionnaire over the phone, and you're writing down what they say, just as you would if you were administering the background questionnaire in person. And you get to the last part about technology. So the first question is, do you have an email address? Because without an email address, it's utterly impossible to use any of the meeting software. And then if they do have an email address, you ask them to give it to you so you can use it to contact them. If they don't, then one of the things your program may have to decide is let's figure out a way to set everybody up, all learners up, with an email address. A lot more people have them nowadays than they used to, just because even just to download games and apps on your iPhone or other smartphone, you usually need an email address. But just to make sure that folks have them. Now, as to the questions we're asking, after we ask whether they've got an email address, then we want to know, you're already talking to them on the phone, so you want to know, are we using a cell phone or a landline? And then you want a sense of whether it's their personal phone and they have access to it, or whether they've borrowed it from a neighbor or somebody in their family. And if it isn't your personal phone, you want to know if they can use it for an extended period of time, because you're thinking we might have to assess this learner using the cell phone, and that would tie up that particular cell phone or landline for half an hour anyway. And then we want to know whether they have access to any devices that might be able to handle a Zoom call, tablet or iPad, laptop computer, desktop computer, MacBook, any other names for these devices that you can think of, just to make sure you're getting the full information from learners. And then the last question is whether they have high-speed internet or broadband at home. And our comment is, if the learner isn't sure what you mean about this, ask if they're able to download and watch movies and videos easily on their tablet or computer. If they aren't, if it's really halting and slow, the way my satellite internet is when I'm in Western Massachusetts, then probably it's not going to be a good idea. These are all questions that you can use to help decide what form of assessment you're going to use with a person. Obviously, if they say, I don't have a computer, I don't have any devices, or if they say, I don't have high-speed internet, the decision has been made for you. You're going to try to assess them over the phone. Any questions about that so far? And we could do this orally. People could just unmute and ask a question if they have a quick one.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question. This is Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
By mailing out a paper version of the test booklet to students, aren't we opening up ourselves to the idea that the students will prep or get coached?
Yeah, they might. They might. When you're talking to them on the phone before you mail the booklet, you could say that this is a diagnostic assessment and it'll work best if you just take it yourself as directed when we do it over the phone together. But that's right. There's absolutely no way to keep people from doing that. And someone who's and learners can also be reminded that this diagnostic assessment is not going to be used for their promotion into the next class. It's not going to be used for whether or not they're going to get a high set degree or anything like that. It's literally just to find out about their reading so we can help them in the best way. And that the best way they can do their part of the assessment is to just do it when they get it. And give a sort of honest response. But that's an excellent question. And all we can do is that hope that folks are taking this in the right spirit, that they're not trying to fool us. Because in the long run, if a person appeared to be a stronger reader than they really were, it wouldn't help them. We'd put them in the wrong class and we'd be constantly giving them stuff that was too hard for them. Yeah, that's all we can do, but it's an excellent question. But it's either that or not assess them at all. So
no, that's great, and thank you for your suggestions.
Yeah, and maybe as we talk about it, I'm glad you raised that, Brooke, because now that I think of it, when you first have that initial contact over the phone and you're doing the background questionnaire, you can also explain to them that if they are going to be getting these assessments in the mail, the student booklet, what the purpose of it is and how you hope they'll treat it, and that they won't use it to practice, because if they practice in it ahead of time or get help with it ahead of time, you won't get accurate information and you won't be able to help them as well. Okay, Pam, can we go on to the next one, please? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cell phone or landline, option A. You're going to phone the learner, and even that, from the times when I used to do it back in the old days, isn't as easy as it sounds, because people are working and they're hard to reach and they don't always call you back and so forth. But anyway, you're a persistent, dedicated teacher, and you phone the learner and you make contact. And so the first thing you're going to do after introducing yourself and explaining what the process is, and you'll be partly explaining how this relates to the work at your site or your program, so each explanation will be a little bit different. And then you'll say, and now I'd like to get some background information on you that will help us to teach you better and learn about your interests and your goals. So you administer the background questionnaire. If it's a returning learner and you already have background information on them, then probably all you'd need to do would be to ask the last few questions about the technology. And the other thing, and you guys can weigh in on this too, Pam and I were surmising that this fall anyway, the main priority for teachers is going to be to assess new people whom you haven't met before, that you don't have any information about at all, you've never assessed. So you wouldn't be as likely to start reassessing returning students until later in the fall. So it's likely, if you are just trying to get new people into the program and into the appropriate placement, it's likely you're going to be giving almost everybody the background questionnaire. And I think that even whether you give the background questionnaire in person or over the phone, you need to have polite ways to cut people off, because sometimes they'll just kind of go on to answer a question, and that's wonderful. But on the other hand, their time and yours is valuable, and if you have a lot to do, so you have to have a technique. Each of us has our own for saying, that's very interesting, but we have so many more questions. Can I move on? However you like to say it. Point 3. If the learner has time during this call, and this has nothing to do with whether they may or may not be able to be tested via Zoom, but if they have time during this call, and you've already taken at least 10 minutes to do the background questionnaire, if they have time, you can administer the word meaning test. And you can, because that can be done over the phone. You're just pronouncing a word, and then you are asking them to give you the definition, and you're writing down what they say. And you explain how the test works. You tell them to relax, and you're going to be saying some words. The only thing I think you'll have to watch out for, especially over the cell phone, is you'll have to be used to the cell phone lag, and you'll also have to be used to the possibility that learners are more likely to have misheard a word because you're saying it to them over the phone. So be ready to repeat a word if they didn't hear it, or if they start to give you the definition of a word that has a similar sound, but it's not the same word you pronounced, be ready to repronounce the target word for them, especially over the phone. Marilee raised the issue of whether you would be giving diagnostic assessments a second time. And I would respectfully disagree with her, especially the ones that have a Form B, such as the word recognition and word recognition test, the QARI. So you could, if you wanted to see whether a student over the course of a school year had made improvement in word recognition, you could give the word reading test a second time. Give Form A
John,
one time. Yes, Marilee.
I'm going to disagree that you disagree with me.
Okay.
Massachusetts does not recommend that you re-administer or do a second assessment. You're absolutely correct. There would be no harm to the student to do that. The progress is just simply based on watching the student and assess their learning while they're in class to do that. So Massachusetts really doesn't recommend that you do it. A second assessment. I think it's just to save programs time. But you're
I would only assess things that had a Form B. And of course, if you're using the DAR, you have a Form B for everything.
Right. Not all programs have a form.
No, I understand. No, they have Form B of the QARI because it's free. Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to hurt if they do, but it's not required.
Yeah. Oh, I certainly wouldn't do it either. But again, I used to teach beginning reading and reading 2 when you're teaching a lot of specific phonics skills. And all along the way, you're always trying to assess with a variety of formal and informal tests whether they're getting the phonics that you're teaching and whether they can sort of do it in isolation. So I think it's not for the same purpose. You've already got a diagnostic profile. You're just trying to find out whether what you're doing is working and for what things and what things is not working. I certainly wouldn't say it should be required either. It doesn't make sense. Oh, other comments. That was important. Somebody else had a comment about that.
So Lisa had a good comment about possibly that when you mail something to them, that you could add a little note that says, please don't open before the call with so-and-so, something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I thought of that too. That's a good idea. I forgot to mention it. That's something you could do. And you could also mention that in the phone call, that when you get this packet, please don't open it until we do our phone call together on whatever date you've set up for that. And of course, the other thing, I also know from experience, it's one thing to say, well, you're going to mail things to a learner, but that's not always easy, so that could be somewhat fraught as well. People don't always have good, reliable mailboxes. They may be living with family and friends, so you have to make sure that you try to get from them an address that works. So if they're staying with family and friends, then you'll have to have an address that goes to them in care of some family member in the house, or the post office may not deliver it. And that's assuming we don't run into big problems with the post office, period. So even the smallest things with our population can sometimes be a challenge. Point 3, if the learner has enough time, try to get the word meaning test done. But you need about 20 minutes for that. And you should ask them, do you have time now to do one brief test with me of word meaning? If they don't, then you'll have to take that up in the next call. And then you go to making an appointment for a follow-up call, and you hope it's about a week or 10 days later. You need time for the assessments to arrive in their mailbox. Again, I know from experience that this is kind of fraught, that sometimes it's hard for our students to keep appointments. If you have the time, you could also do what the doctor's office does with us now, call the student the day before and say, or text them if they have a smartphone and say, just saying, we're getting together tomorrow at 4 for an hour. So you will have mailed them a student book with the word reading and fluency passages. And again, we're only doing word reading and fluency. Pam and I felt that it would be very hard to assess a phonics test, either DAR or the Sylvia Green's informal word analysis inventory, the free one, over the phone or even over Zoom. It's hard enough to hear people trying to pronounce real words and whole words, much less listening for single sounds and short, low-frequency words. Plus, the thing that we always have to contend with in person, as well as even more so over the phone, is people's various accents based on their native languages. And I think that's especially difficult to do with phonics tests, not to mention trying to do it via Zoom or via the telephone. So we left that out. On the other hand, this is all an experiment, and if anybody wants to try giving the informal word analysis inventory, which is part of the battery of free tests that comes with the diagnostic assessment course, or if you use the DAR, if you want to try giving the DAR to a learner online or over the phone, go for it, and I'd love to know how it goes. And then, point 6, you're going to try to complete the assessments during the second phone call. And then while you're on the phone, you're going to be using your hard copy of the response record book to record the learner's answers. And then that can go into a file, however you keep such information. But it's pretty much ready to go. It'll have all the tests and the results right there. Any questions about doing a cell phone or landline assessment, or any ideas about how we could do it better? Pam, should we go on to the next screen? And this is option B, which we hope people will be able to use with a number of learners. So everything starts off the same way. You're going to contact people initially on the phone. You're going to phone the learner. And just as in option A, you're going to do the background questionnaire. And if at the end of the background questionnaire, the learner has email, and then they have a suitable device and they have access to broadband, what we recommend is, assuming you're near your computer at the time you're doing this, you try to set up a Zoom call with them right then and there just to see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you're sort of back to square one, either because there is not enough broadband, or the learner's having trouble navigating Zoom, or whatever. If it doesn't work, then you just go back to square one and you're doing basically a phone testing situation. If it does work, then you could go ahead and try doing the vocabulary test using Zoom. And that you don't really need Zoom to do because it can be done just with a phone. But if you could do the word meaning test if you have time to get that out of the way. If the learner can't do a long Zoom call with you during that first connection, I mean, they may be free. I mean, some folks do have time if you catch them at the right time of day, depending on their life situation and so forth. If they have time to do the whole shooting match, to do the Zoom call at that time, then go ahead and try to do all the tests. If they can't do the Zoom call, then you want to schedule a time for a convenient callback. And then whenever that takes place, either at first contact or on a callback, you'll conduct Zoom testing, and similar to and exactly the same as option A, phone testing, you're going to use your hard copy of the response record book to record their answers. Point 6 just comes back to what we were saying. If for any reason the Zoom administration doesn't work, you're back to option A. Has anybody tried anything remotely like this so far with Zoom and learners? What has happened, I guess, when you try contacting folks on Zoom? Has anybody tried that, and have you had any luck? Mary?
I have been working with tutors and students to get on Zoom or to tutor by telephone. And everybody is different, and some may take 3 tries to actually get them on Zoom or Google Meet. Having to be patient and to get them there is the most important, and it may take some time depending on every single person you work with, depending on the computer. Yeah.
I'm teaching on Zoom quite a bit, using Zoom quite a bit. But just to, I think it's Mary. Mary, you have Winslow, but I think it's Mary. As Mary said, having some way to show students how to sign on to Zoom is really a good thing to have. So if there are short videos that sometimes people can watch, you can also mail a link in an email so that they can see how to get onto Zoom, but also sometimes how to download it onto their phone or their computer.
Oh, that's great.
That helps. It helps a lot because they can watch it several times and try it before you get on a call with them.
That's excellent advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's go on to the next one, Pam. Here, Pam and I are going to demonstrate what Zoom testing might be like. And I'm going to play the learner, and Pam is going to play the teacher. She's going to administer part of the word reading test to me. And so she'll be showing you and talking through how she shares her screen, because once she shares her screen, then I'm going to be able to see the word list that she wants me to read for her. Anything else we should say to set this up, Pam?
Nope. I am going to do a short, quick intro before I speak with my student or potential student. So during the background questionnaire, and we did it with the phone, John had indicated he had almost finished high school. So what I did was I chose List C in the student booklet to start with.
For word reading, yeah.
Yep, for word reading in the student booklet. And what you have to do, and hopefully you've done this, is you have these documents open first, sort of behind the Zoom screen, so that when you go to share, you can click on it. And I would recommend, John and I had been doing some practicing, because we're choosing List C, which means you got to go past the cover page, the A, the B, that if you scroll first to List C before you share it, it will pop in immediately on List C. So I'm going to share List C and say, "Hi, John. I've chosen a list of words for you to read to me, and you're going to start at the top and move to the next word down and continue through the list of words. And if you have to stop and correct yourself, that's okay. While you're reading, I'm going to be taking notes. So when you're ready, John, start with that first word."
Okay. Citizen, computer, information, temporary, explanation, application, concentration, concentrate.
Good.
Development, material, practice.
Okay, great. Great. I like what you did with those words. I'm going to scroll down to the next one, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing with this list. Start at the top and move through it.
Okay. Contribution, convenient, individual, acknowledge, pollution, optimistic, reputation, urgent, prescription, confidential.
Okay. And John, shall we switch back over to?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll go back to being John and Pam again, just presenters, not student and teacher.
Right. Okay, and I'm going to share that again. So, all right. We're going to turn it over to you folks to give it a try. I wasn't sure who had experience with sharing in Zoom. I just want to point out that when you get into the breakout rooms, you're going to be able to share. So this particular toolbar is going to be there, and you're going to hit, it's bright green right now, that share icon. And once you do that, what happens is it changes the toolbar for you, and it actually moves to the top, and you end up having to, stop sharing so the person you're working with can share. I want to show you one thing. I did create a little handout, and this is it, that goes specifically with sharing the documents we're talking about. And so this is in the course itself, but what you want to do is to make sure that, and I'm going to draw a line around it, when you go to share, you're actually choosing the student booklet and then clicking on the share button below. I'm hoping this quick little tutorial will help you move into the break rooms to be successful.
And the other thing I would add, Pam, is that, of course, you can only share stuff that's on your computer and available to you. When you go share screen by yourself, you will have to have downloaded and had on your computer in the background the documents you want to share, so that it will go find them for you and you can select the one you want. Right, Pam?
Yes, definitely. And Gail had mentioned, if you don't have a document, then possibly in the pairing you're with, the other person has the document. And that's our hope as to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
In the live session, the participants were paired up in breakout rooms to practice administering the reading diagnostic assessments using Zoom. Your next steps are, first, complete the required knowledge check. You will find the link in the navigation panel in the Blackboard course. It will be along the left side of your screen. Once you have successfully completed the knowledge check, there will be a certificate of completion made available to you. And again, the link for this certificate is in the navigation panel. We recommend you practice administering the reading diagnostic assessments with a colleague using the virtual platform you plan to use with your learners. If you have any questions, please reach out to either Dr. John Strucker or Pam Dempsey O'Connell. You will find their emails in the course above this video.